Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jungmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Junha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Korea Pro Podcast. It's 4:40, Thursday, May 7th, and we don't have John this week. John couldn't pick a better week to go on vacation, a real vacation. He must be feeling very FOMO right now. Today, I'm joined by Junha Park. Let's start with the big one that John missed, Hormuz. There was a explosion and fire on a South Korean vessel run by HMM. That was anchored in UAE, I believe, inside the Hormuz Strait. What we know so far, it's still very thin, but basically after this happened, a lot of reporters were struggling to figure out like what to believe, basically.
What actually happened?
Yeah, because it was really confusing at first because the breaking news happened, but then it was citing certain intel, 첩보.
Right.
And when news writers say 첩보, it means it's a rumor, right?
And it was from a civic group.
Yeah, it was from a civic group, but it was a very relevant group, actually. So who made the first claim that there could be a 피격, a strike?
So the Korea Seafarers Welfare Association, or the Employment Center, they first indicated that to local media late Monday evening that they received meaningful information that there was a presumed strike on an HMM vessel.
And then there was like 1 or 2 hours that was late night, basically. And we were trying to figure out if the government will put out any statement about that. And we could see from the start that they were being very, very careful.
Exactly.
The press corps chat was just bombarded with requests for confirmation. But it was basically they're looking into it. They heard it, they read it, they're looking into it. Hyundai Merchant Marine, which is HMM, and local media, they sort of started reporting on what they started to hear from the witnesses. And the foreign ministry said that they're checking whether a South Korean ship was struck. And there was an anonymous official, which I blamed for the confusion at first, that a Korean flag cargo ship was presumed to have been struck. And from this, we were sort of waiting to if we have to write an emergency EB or not. And then HMM said that there was a fire in the portside engine room accompanied by a sound of explosion, which is still debated whether or not it was a explosion sound because they couldn't find any like holes or anything related to a potential strike. But so does the South Korean government claims. And later, throughout the night, foreign ministry was trying to figure out what happened. And then around 9 p.m., they started confirming that there was a presumed fire, basically, and some were calling it accident or incident. And we could see the South Korean government was trying very, very, very hard to not use the word strike or presumed strike at all.
They were walking on a rope, and they did confirm that all of the crew members were unharmed. They confirmed that I think about 6 or 8 Korean nationals were there, while the remaining 24 or 23 were foreign nationals. Or 18 foreign nationals, sorry. So according to Oceans Ministry, 26 rock flag vessels carrying over 120 Korean crew members are currently in the Strait of Hormuz, while another 37 Korean nationals are aboard these foreign flag vessels.
So this ship that caught fire due to whatever reason that might be was a Panama shipped flag, but it's run by a South Korean operator.
Right. So it's called by its cargo name as HMM Namu, the Namu Ho, which did fly a Panama flag. It does have predominantly foreign nationals that are operating on board the ship, as we've just mentioned, but effectively it is owned by HMM.
Right. So this raised a lot of questions and concerns in South Korea that we should have been already thinking about because a lot of South Koreans are still stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. But this raised attention, I think. How do we get these people home? How do we get these vessels out under various different scenarios? One scenario would be it was actually strike.
Right.
This raises the bar like immediately toward like, then do we mobilize now? Like, do we participate or not? Like, how do we go and support, protecting the citizens that are struck in Hormuz? But National Assembly has to approve whatever
Right.
mobilization,
And
right?
then Trump hit.
Yeah.
So then Trump hit True Social, as he usually does on a regular basis. And he said that, or he claimed that the South Korean vessel was hit by an Iranian strike. And then he, in turn, requested on South Korea to come and join Project Freedom.
He was like, you should join the mission now.
Right.
But then a day later,
Then a day later, at the request of Pakistan, he said, he called it off. Right. So it's really, and also Wee Sung-lak, the national security advisor, also determined that since Project Freedom is now a no-show, we do not need to consider joining Project Freedom, but we will look at other options.
yeah, he sort of was like, well, we were gonna really, really, really review it, but now we kind of don't have to. Was the gist of the briefing, which I found a bit funny. I think it was like a diplomat version of being sassy.
Quite
Uh,
tongue in cheek.
yeah, but there are other scenarios as well because investigators will go there to figure out the source of the fire and explosion. There are more gray area scenarios as well. First, what if this was related to the war? Something like a debris fell and the ship was damaged. It still raises the question of then how do we keep these people and the vessels safe, right?
Right.
And what
So
should South Korea do?
it was determined that Iranian strikes were going on somewhere in the vicinity of where the rock ship was anchored.
Right, there were like drone stuff and
There was
UAE
drone and
ships were hit,
missiles
right?
attacks from the Iranians towards the UAE when that was
Which
going
they
on.
claim they didn't, right?
Right. And then there was also Project Freedom, which was ongoing as well. So,
So there are American missiles as well,
Mhm.
right?
so it really does beg the question of who done it, right? So it doesn't really put South Korea in a very soft spot. It puts South
Either way, it's bad,
Mhm.
right?
But I think it's up to the people that are heading to the Strait of Hormuz
Mhm.
and who are heading to where the ship is currently anchored right now
Mhm.
after the damage to determine whether or not this was indeed a strike or whether it was an engine explosion or vice versa.
I mean, like engine explosion, it's about security issue and real time information sharing. Like people need to dispatch people to help with technical difficulties. And so that's a bit easier. But another scenario is where they didn't intend to strike the South Korean vessel directly, but something was flying nearby and something fell over and it hit the South Korean ship. This causes a more difficult dilemma for South Korea, it
Sure.
seems. Moving on to more domestic issues, South Korea's consumer price index reached a 21-month high as a result of the prolonged conflict in Iran. So definitely it's not completely unrelated, but this is actually pretty high. It rose 2.6% year on year in April, up from 2.2% in March. And of course, the main driver was oil. Surprise.
Evidently.
Yeah, petroleum prices had jumped 22% from a year earlier. This was the biggest increase since July 2022. Gasoline, kerosene, they all rose as well. Diesel surged 31% as well. And because of all these petroleum and other oil prices going up, there were service sector and other areas where consumer price also went up. Like international airfare, of course, it will go up because the companies start advanced calculating how
Sure.
much
Mhm.
they will need to prepare for. Engine oil replacement fees, they are up. Laundry fees are also up because they use a lot of oil related materials when they're providing the service, like operation cost as well. And it was interesting because the briefer from the Statistics Korea tried to emphasize a lot that, oh, like the agricultural, livestock, and fisheries price fell 0.5%. It was like tempering down the overall inflation. Like it could have been worse, but they were a little bit less expensive. But if you look at the actual data, everything from rice, beef, pork, eggs, everything it continued to rise.
Mhm.
So this will lead to a base effect, basically, going forward in May as well, according to the deputy governor of the Bank of Korea. So what the actual people like going to Lotte Mart or High Mart or whatever mart that's
The
near their
shopping bags
yeah
are going to be
shop
lighter.
yeah. Like people are not probably not really feeling the
Hmm.
0.5% going down, but feeling more of the inflation they have been facing. Depending on the households, it might be different, but it's not looking great, basically.
Moving on,
Yeah.
Samsung.
Yeah.
Quite
That
a lot of K-drama esque
yes.
labor union infighting
So
going on.
we have a term for this in Korea. It's called 집안 싸움.
Hmm.
집안 싸움 means, families fighting each other, basically, rather than external enemies. This is what exactly happened in Samsung Electronics labor union because they were supposed to like all work together in a joint move to try to get more, 상여금, the bonus from the semiconductor and AI related boost that Samsung Electronics saw in their revenue recently. But it's just been a few weeks since they started doing that. But now they split into two. Like DX actually quit because DS is a semiconductor and the X refers to experience. So it's like appliances, smartphones, any electronic devices that you know from Samsung. They are a big division as well, but because semiconductor is the main exporting market right now, they have been the driver of the Samsung's revenue recently. And what happened is that the DX labor union members they were quite not happy that the what the labor union was demanding to Samsung board members is basically chips related bonuses rather than anything else. And DX recently actually faced, drawdown in the revenue that they saw. And the controversy basically is because the union initially demanded Samsung to, use 15% of the annual operating profit. This is pretty big. Although other labor unions at like LG or other companies are asking for a similar percentage as well or even higher. But anyways, they were asking for uncapped bonuses for the semiconductor staff, which is device solutions division, and this is a pretty big amount. And the smartphone and appliance workers of the DX division, they did like push back, but they were like, why are demands related to other sector
Right.
staff not included into
Hmm.
this joint bigger labor union, struggle against the Samsung leadership. And then what happened was they actually left the joint movement. And so the number of the members of the union actually went down a lot in
Mm.
the past 10 days. And now this is facing really bad public sentiment as
Indeed.
well.
Yeah.
And it's so viral on social media because, if you work for Samsung, you're an elite, is what at least the public thinks. And then
But this public image of labor unions protesting in Pyeongtaek is not exactly something that
yeah,
resonates.
I think also the big part of the criticism comes from, progressives in their 40s and 50s, I think,
Mm.
because labor unions used to have a much deeper meaning in South Korean history. Labor unions are supposed to be for the weak. The union protests are one of the only weapons that the weak has against the corporate,
Yeah, it's been
right?
like that since the
And
60s, 80s.
yeah, and that's why the Yellow Envelope Act was passed.
Mm.
And then using that, it's fine. It's their right to ask for more bonuses depending on reasonable contributions that they made. But then from public sentiment point of view, public image point of view, them only focusing on certain type of workers rather than workers in general, I don't think it really boded well
Right.
with overall
Hmm.
public, it seems. And so the president had to respond too.
Right. So the president, he did say something along the lines of requesting these labor union members to not overstep the mark or
Yeah.
something like that along those lines. What is the labor ministry and the Lee administration actually doing?
Right. So after saying that, that was also controversial in and of itself because Lee did not really mention which labor union he was
Oh,
referring to, but it was right after that that whole drama was in the headlines.
debacle. Hmm.
And then what the labor union leader of the Samsung, the joint union said was like, I think Lee is referring to LGU plus. They are
Hmm.
asking for like much more than we are. So that didn't land well either. Right now, they are just wait and see mode because it's not an area that government should be stepping in.
No,
Really, like labor union versus corporates. Um, but then if it sort of spirals into overstepping the boundaries, like legal boundaries that they newly set, like either part, I think that's when labor ministry will step in and try to clarify what the law means,
sure.
what the guidelines mean, and what the labor commission relations commissions can do in order to mediate. But I don't think it reached that point yet because the union split, and they need to rethink their strategy, basically. Let's move on to more of the. I think this was actually a big headline, but because there were so many stuff going on this week, this was a bit underreported. But the National Assembly held a plenary session,
Right.
and there was a very big vote that they were working on. What was it?
Right. So it effectively looks at a part of a constitutional amendment, right? So it's three amendments in total.
Hmm.
One is the looking over the preamble, including the May 18th Gwangju Democratization Movement and also other democratization movements into the mix in order to fix South Korea's cultural and historical identity. The other one is looking at the National Assembly's checks and balances over executive power. So
Hmm. That's about martial law,
in
right?
Indeed. Right. And then the third one is the government's or stipulating the government's role in enforcing or acting towards the development of local communities.
So that's about the fair development scheme thing,
So
right?
regional development.
Regional development. So I think the constitutional amendment on the preamble, I think, has been something that South Korea has been talking about for so many
Yeah.
years, but it did not pass the plenary session. Did it not meet quorum?
Yeah. So he did not meet a lack of quorum because effectively the PPP boycotted the
Did they
vote.
like not come in?
No, they did not come into the plenary
What
session.
about the minor faction?
The minor factions, so in total, I believe it was 176 lawmakers who were voting today and were present in the hall, which means that
Quorum
also,
is two-thirds,
right.
right?
So also taking into account that these 176, so there's usually about 183 or 86 minor opposition, and ruling party lawmakers that abide by and resonate with this
Mhm.
amendment bill. But due to the by elections and most lawmakers resigning from their seats to run in these by elections,
Oh,
there are some lawmakers which are left vacant or
I
seats which are
see.
left vacant. So that's why that also could not reach the quorum as well. But effectively, the PPP doesn't really have a reason to go against these constitutional amendments. President Yoon, who the former president, he did campaign on these issues. Lee also campaigned on the same issues as well. I think that they don't really want to give a lot of political momentum to the DP ahead. I think we're only just less than a month away from
Hmm.
the local elections. So that's why the PPP has tended to resonate to a boycott quite often.
Right, but like devil's advocate, like if they are being like a trying to at least try to be somewhere near strategic, if it's a amendment that DP can promote as their very big achievement, like why
Hmm.
would they, right?
Indeed. And also at the same time, there's also always a saying from experts that come in whenever I talk to them about constitutional amendment and whether ROC can actually update this 40-year-old document, right? They are essentially saying that there needs to be a public consensus, right? Of course, the government or public office or the legislature can introduce this bill for amendment, but it's really not up to the speakership or the legislature or the government to include a something in the preamble or include these constitutional amendments based on their own accord without actually asking for support from the public beforehand. You could say that this was quite rushed.
So I feel like constitutional what did don't doesn't constitutional amendment require 국민투표, like
Right.
the referendum?
Right. So that's effectively what they were trying to push for with
Right,
this
right.
with this bill
It
today.
was a proposal for a
Mhm.
referendum to happen with the local election, right?
Indeed.
I see.
But I think the point that experts are trying to make is that even if this is something for referendum, the pretext matters, right?
Hmm.
So the pre context matters where before a referendum bill is placed onto the plenary session, you
Mhm.
need a public consensus before that as well.
Yeah, that's what really bothers me. Like, if you think about it, like speaking as a South Korean citizen, like not as a journalist or analyst, it's just imagine like you and I have to go like for the referendum on June 3rd.
Hmm.
And then if I look at the list of what's being amended in the Constitution, yes, sure, these are the things that we do need to update. But is that it? Because there are so many other things in the Constitution that are anachronistic,
Hmm.
right? There are also other stuff. This is Korea Pro, but like we have been talking about Constitution endless in the past 48 hours because North Korean Constitution, we got our hands on it.
Oh
And
boy.
then, that made South Korean Constitution look very, very anachronistic.
Hmm.
And where is a public consensus discussion about that? And there are other issues in there that are based on, political situation 45 years ago,
Right.
basically. And where are the discussions about that? I feel like that is partly both parties' fault for not making those agenda come into the National Assembly discussion, making it public, and then just focusing on the things that they feel like,
They can reach a public consensus with air quotes.
yeah, exactly. So that bothers me.
Right. I mean, I think that that view is shared amongst the general public. I think that, unless you have kept an eye on this like we have for the past couple of years, a constitutional amendment referendum doesn't really strike as something that will change a person or the ordinary citizen's life per se.
Especially younger generation, because I get it. And I do understand why the spirit of Gwangju is important. I do think it is important,
Hmm.
personally.
Hmm.
But imagine you are a 19-year-old who never really don't really know what it is, and then constitutional amendment, it's their first election that they are voting on, and they see it. Like, why would they care, right?
Effectively, it's just a question of how much thinking went into this. And on the part, it looks like it was the speakership, the speaker
I mean,
Won
they
Shik's.
care, right?
They do care, but it's a question of whether the public shares that sentiment.
Very good point. Week ahead, some folks are going to Hormuz.
Yeah, so as we mentioned or alluded to beforehand, some South Korean officials, Wee Sung-lak said yesterday, will be heading to the Strait of Hormuz to check out what actually happened to the vessel that was presumed to have been struck or had a temporary explosion.
I bet anything that it will remain very vague, despite the investigation. And there would be drills as well.
Yeah, so there's the Lee administration's first joint live fire drills between the ROK armed forces that will be happening in Pocheon next week. I believe it's the 16th of May, and they'll be holding it for about 3 days afterwards as well.
And most importantly, next week, John will be back from a very well timed vacation. John, I hope you're enjoying being left out of all the breaking news about the fire and potential strike on South Korean ship that you have been waiting forever. But all of this information, minus John coming back, will be in your inbox at 2 p.m. on Monday. So if you want more, please subscribe. Have a good weekend, everybody. And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jungmin Kim.
I'm Junho Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.